The ballroom of the Halcyon Grand Hotel glowed like a fairy tale, drenched in soft golden lights, chandeliers that hung like frozen waterfalls, and music so delicate it could melt into the air. It was the night of the Callahan Foundation Gala, the most elite event of the year in New York City. Celebrities, politicians, royalty, and business tycoons waltzed beneath ceilings painted with angels. The scent of orchids and champagne drifted through the marble halls. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns worth more than most homes floated from room to room, each careful step a performance in wealth and status. At the center of it all sat Celeste Callahan, icy, poised, the queen of high society. Beside her was her son, Nathaniel Callahan, 33, handsome and impossibly composed, heir to the Callahan empire and famously private. Rumor had it, he never danced, not once, not even at his own engagement party, which he later called off. As the evening carried on, laughter and violin music intertwined. Waiters in white gloves moved silently between tables. Reporters snapped photos of gowns and jewels. Everyone who was anyone had been invited. Everyone. Except Elise Washington. Elise had no intention of stepping into that ballroom. Her janitor's uniform, navy slacks, a pressed shirt, and soft-soled shoes was not made for such a place. Her job was to clean the hotel after the guests had left, not to walk through the glittering crowd as if she belonged. But that evening, something changed. At 7:43 p.m., Elise's 9-year-old daughter Zara had called her in tears. "Mama, I left my school diorama in the lounge. I need it for class tomorrow. Please, Mama." Elise had worked a double shift that day and was just settling into dinner at home. But one sound from her daughter's shaky voice made her grab her keys and rush back to the hotel. She promised herself she'd be quick, just sneak in through staff access, grab the project, and leave before anyone saw. But Zara had insisted on coming along. "I want to help," she said, hugging her coat tight over her little sweater. Elise didn't argue. They took the subway, Zara's tiny backpack bouncing with every step, and entered through the rear service hallway of the Halcyon. They were almost at the lounge when they realized the doors were locked, and the only open path to the lounge was through the main ballroom. Elise hesitated. "We'll be fast. Don't make eye contact. Just keep your head down," she whispered to, Zara, holding her hand tightly. But the moment the two stepped into the ballroom, the golden crowd stopped. Gasps, whispers, silence. It was as if the music had choked. A woman in emerald silk stood from the Callahan family's main table. Her voice pierced the air like ice breaking. "Over a frozen pond! What is that doing here?" Elise stopped. Her spine straightened. Her eyes found Celeste Callahan's, sharp, cold, and unforgiving. Celeste's gaze moved from Elise's janitor uniform to Zara's worn school shoes. Oh, how charming! The help brought her child to the gala. Celeste's voice carried high above the violins. Laughter followed. Unkind, rehearsed, poisonous. Zara gripped her mother's hand tighter. "Mama, why is that lady yelling?" "She's just confused, baby," Elise said calmly. Her voice didn't shake. "We'll get your project and go." But security guards had already begun to approach. Two tall men in suits flanked the pair, their faces neutral but firm. Nathaniel Callahan watched it all quietly. He had been sitting at the table, bored of the conversations about hedge funds and opera sponsors. But when Elise entered, something shifted in the room and in him. He noticed the calm in her face, the way she didn't flinch under humiliation. He noticed the little girl clutching her hand, not crying or hiding, just staring up with innocent confusion. Something about that moment felt different from all the others in his carefully constructed life. Zara, curious and brave, looked up at Celeste and asked, "Why are you so mean to my mom? She works hard to help people like you." Gasps rippled. Across the room again, but this time they were sharper, more uncertain. Celeste's jaw clenched. "You are trespassing, Miss Washington," she snapped. "I'm aware," Elise replied gently. "I'm only here to retrieve my daughter's school project. We'll leave right away." She turned, but the guards blocked her path. "You need to be escorted out through the rear," one said flatly. "No," said Nathaniel Callahan. His voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the entire room. He rose from his chair, tall and calm, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he walked toward Elise and Zara. Celeste tried to whisper something to him, but he didn't stop. The crowd parted like water around him. Elise looked up at him, unsure. "I don't dance with anyone," Nathaniel said, looking around at the stunned audience, "because I haven't yet met anyone worth dancing with." He turned back to Elise. "Until now." And then, in front of Manhattan's most powerful, he extended his hand to the janitor in front of him. "Elise Washington," he said gently. "May I have this dance?" The ballroom gasped. Elise froze. Her lips parted slightly. She looked down at Zara, whose eyes sparkled with wonder. "Go on, Mama," she whispered. "Show them." And in that moment, between breath and silence, Elise reached out and placed her hand in his. As they walked to the center of the ballroom floor, the orchestra hesitated. Then, as if sensing history, they began to play a soft waltz, and Elise Washington danced. She danced not like a janitor or a tired mother, but like a woman who had once known the stage. Her feet glided, her posture perfect. Her arms moved with the memory of classical training, not flashy, but full of story, soul, sorrow, and survival. People whispered. Eyes widened. A few stood in stunned silence. Even Celeste Callahan sat, frozen. Nathaniel led gently, but it was clear. Elise didn't need a lead. She had carried herself through life's storms, and now she danced like she had nothing left to hide. By the end of the waltz, the entire ballroom had fallen into awe, and yet Elise bowed her head, not with pride, but with quiet strength. The music faded. The crowd erupted, but Elise only looked at Zara. Her daughter's smile was all that mattered. No one knew yet who Elise Washington really was, but that would soon change, because this dance, the one the billionaire chose with the janitor, was only the beginning. The room stood frozen, as if time itself had paused to make way for something sacred. The final note of the waltz hung in the air like a heartbeat waiting to be heard. And in that breathless space between sound and silence, Elise Washington stood. In the center of the gilded ballroom, no longer a janitor, no longer invisible, but a woman who had reminded a room full of the elite that grace could live in places they had never dared to look. For a moment, no one knew how to react. The silence after the music was louder than the music itself. Then came the applause. Not thunderous, not at first, but hesitant, like a wave finding the courage to rise. It started with one of the violinists, who stood and clapped with both hands trembling, then another, then a guest, then a full table of donors, and suddenly the entire ballroom erupted in applause. A standing ovation for the woman in janitor's shoes. But Elise didn't smile. She simply curtsied, soft, humble, and looked down at her daughter. Zara beamed from ear to ear, her small hands clapping wildly. "Mama, you were like magic, Nathaniel." Callahan stood beside Elise, quiet, composed. But his eyes betrayed something deeper, something shifting. He hadn't expected this. He had offered a moment of kindness, perhaps defiance, but what he received in return was something he couldn't quite explain. The way she moved, the way the entire room bowed, not to his wealth, not to his title, but to her story, even though they didn't know it yet. Celeste Callahan did not clap. Her expression was carved in marble, lips tight, eyes dark. She had spent 3 decades building a world where people like Elise were never allowed center stage. And now, with one dance, her son had dismantled the invisible wall she had spent a lifetime erecting. Elise stepped back, unsure of what to do. The ballroom was still watching. She felt exposed, not because of the stairs, but because her body had moved in ways it hadn't moved in years. Somewhere deep inside her, the dancer she once was, the girl named Alicia Monroe, had awakened. And that terrified her. Nathaniel leaned toward her gently. "You've done something tonight no one here will forget," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to get my daughter's project," Elise whispered, brushing her hair behind her ear, heart racing. "And instead," he replied, "you reminded everyone what real beauty looks like." Elise's face flushed. "Mr. Callahan, thank you, but we should go." Zara tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, can we stay just a little longer? Please? I want to see the golden cake." Elise sighed. "Just for a minute, love. Then we go." Before they could move, a woman stepped in front of them, tall, sharp-featured, her heels clicking like gavel strikes. "Excuse me," she said coldly. "Do you mind if I speak to your guest, Nathaniel?" Celeste, Nathaniel hesitated. "Mother, it's fine," Elise said, already bracing herself. She turned to face Celeste, spine straight. Celeste's smile was practiced, her voice honeyed and cutting. "You dance well. Surprising considering your position." "Talent doesn't check uniforms," Elise replied, her tone calm. "Indeed," Celeste said, "but opportunity does." Elise said nothing. She had no interest in debating with a woman who measured worth in fabric and last names. Celeste leaned in closer. "You may think this evening makes you special, but this is a room built on centuries of selection. You're a story now, yes. But stories fade. You'll be forgotten by morning." Elise smiled for the first time since the dance, a small, knowing smile. "That's what you said to me once before, isn't it?" Celeste's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," Elise said gently. "Just something I remembered." Nathaniel stepped forward again. "Mother, that's enough." Celeste turned on her heel and walked away, the crowd parting in her wake. Zara tugged Elise's hand again. "Mama, what did she mean?" Elise knelt beside her daughter. "Sometimes people forget that kindness is free, so they charge others for respect instead." Zara blinked, puzzled. "That doesn't make any sense," Elise smiled. "Exactly." Just then, a voice called out from the crowd. "Miss Washington?" It was a silver-haired man in glasses, elegant but modest in dress. "I'm Ronald Chen. I'm on the board of the New York Ballet Trust. Forgive my intrusion, but I recognized your style on the dance floor. Were you once trained under—" "Excuse me," Elise cut him off. "It was a long time ago. I only ask," he continued gently, "because that grace, it doesn't just appear. That was the dance of someone who lived for it once." Elise didn't respond. Her fingers tightened around Zara's hand. "I'm sorry," Ronald said, "but if you ever wish to speak or return, even in a small way, we'd be honored." He handed her a card and bowed respectfully before stepping away. Elise slipped the card into her pocket without looking. Nathaniel watched her closely. "He's right. You moved like someone who belongs on stage." "I belonged there once," Elise said softly. "But some places shut their doors for good." Before he could ask more, Zara spotted the diorama she'd left behind. Her volcano project, perfectly untouched on a glass table near the bar. She squealed with joy and ran toward it. Elise followed her quickly and picked it up. "Okay, baby, we've got what we came for. Let's go." Nathaniel moved toward them. "Let me walk you out." "You've done more than enough," Elise said. "Thank you for tonight." "Will I see you again?" he asked, and for the first time his voice faltered. Elise looked at him. really looked. For a moment, she saw not the billionaire heir or the man in the tuxedo, but a person, curious, unsure, searching. "I don't know," she said honestly. And with that, she took Zara's hand and disappeared into the back hallway, the same way she had entered, quiet, uninvited, unseen. But behind her, the ballroom buzzed with questions, rumors, and the impossible idea that a janitor had just taught them all what real elegance looked like. Back home in their tiny two-room apartment, Elise gently placed Zara's project on the kitchen counter and helped her out of her coat. "Mama," Zara whispered as they got ready for bed, "you were the best part of that whole fancy party." Elise laughed softly. "I don't know about that." "I do," Zara said firmly, curling under the blanket. "You looked like a queen. The kind who doesn't need a crown." Elise kissed her forehead and turned off the light. But as she stood alone in the living room, her eyes drifted to the card Ronald Chen had given her. She hadn't heard that name in over a decade. And yet, it had found her again. What the world didn't know, what even Nathaniel didn't know, was that Elise Washington hadn't always been invisible. Once upon a time, under a different name, she had danced on the most prestigious stage in the country, and then one woman destroyed her. That woman was Celeste Callahan. And now, Elise was back in her orbit. But this time, she wasn't 19 and naive. This time, she had something far more powerful than grace. She had nothing left to lose. The next morning, the ballroom was back to being spotless. No trace of champagne spills or judgmental whispers. But the night before lingered in the minds of those who'd witnessed the impossible. A janitor had danced with the billionaire. A black woman had silenced a room full of people who thought they ruled the world. In a tiny walk-up apartment across town, Elise Washington stirred her coffee in silence, watching the sun hit the cracks in her kitchen window. Zara was still asleep, in the bedroom, curled up beside her school project like it was treasure. Elise hadn't slept. Her body ached in ways that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with memory. That dance had awoken muscles that hadn't moved like that in years. But worse, it had awoken her past. The past she had buried so deep, it had almost felt like another life. And in some ways, it was. Back then, she was not Elise Washington. She had been Alicia Monroe, a name that once appeared on the lips of dance critics, across scholarship lists, and on the marquee of the Metropolitan Conservatory's Winter Gala. A name that, at just 19 years old, had been whispered as the next Misty Copeland, the first black principal dancer the city would see in a generation. Alicia had moved with fire in her veins. She had trained from age 5, dancing through poverty, silence, and the weight of every closed door that told her, "You don't belong here." But she had forced her way in, with bruised toes and perfect pirouettes. And just as her star began to rise, someone powerful decided that her light was too bright, that someone was Celeste Callahan. Alicia had never understood the woman's obsession with controlling everything around her, not just social events, but people's futures. Celeste had been the head sponsor of the New York Ballet Fund, a gatekeeper to every stage Alicia danced on. At first, Alicia believed Celeste supported her, smiling in interviews, writing checks, praising her talent, but behind the polished compliments were whispers. Quiet comments about unmarketable backgrounds, about lack of refinement, about how Alicia should be grateful for the spotlight she was given. Then came the night it all changed. Alicia had just finished a rehearsal late at the Yale Met. Her phone buzzed with a notification, photos, dozens of them. Doctored, manipulated images, her face blurred into places it had never been. Headlines linking her name to drugs, stolen scholarships, even accusations of inappropriate behavior with donors. Within days, calls stopped. Sponsors vanished. Her manager told her she was no longer the face they wanted. The conservatory issued a vague statement about integrity and representation. Elijah Monroe disappeared, not in a car crash, not in a scandal, but in silence. And Elise Washington was born. She changed her name, left the dance world, and tried to forget. She worked whatever jobs she could. She cleaned. She waited tables. She gave birth to Zara and poured everything into raising a child who wouldn't carry her scars. And for years, it worked, until last night, when her body remembered a rhythm her heart had never truly forgotten. A knock on the door pulled her out of thought. She opened it carefully. Nathaniel Callahan stood there. He wore jeans and a jacket, his posture humble, not a trace of the billionaire from the ballroom. He held a brown paper bag. "I brought bagels," he said, unsure. Elise blinked. "Why?" "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Or the dance, or how your name isn't just Elise." Her heart skipped. "You did a search?" "Only after I heard Ronald Chen talk about you to another board member," Nathaniel said. "He mentioned a ballerina who disappeared after a scandal. I didn't connect the dots until last night. Elise Washington doesn't exist before 2012. But Alicia Monroe—" "I'm not her anymore," Elise interrupted quickly. Nathaniel held out the bag. "Even if you aren't, I think she still lives inside you." Elise stepped back. "I can't. I don't want Zara exposed to any of this. You don't know what your family did." "I know my mother is ruthless," he said. "But I didn't know she was capable of that." "She wasn't just capable," Elise said softly. "She planned it." She let him in. Zara woke up not long after and ran into her mother's arms. "Is this the cake man?" she asked sleepily, pointing at Nathaniel. Nathaniel laughed. "I suppose so." Elise looked between the two and sighed. "Zara, honey, why don't you eat while Mama talks with our guest?" They sat in the kitchen, her hands around a chipped mug, his eyes searching her face. "She took everything from me," Elise said. "Not just my career. She humiliated me in a way that made people afraid to speak my name. I became a ghost. I lost who I was." Nathaniel looked at her quietly. "But you built a new life. You raised a beautiful daughter. You danced last night, like you still carried power." "It wasn't power," Elise whispered. "It was pain." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nathaniel reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. "I had my assistant look into some of the old PR records, connected to the Callahan Foundation. I think I found something that might help you." Elise opened the folder. Inside were press releases, call logs, emails, and one memo written by a man named Patrick Reeves, a former media consultant known for reputation assassinations. The memo detailed how Celeste Callahan had directed him to reshape the narrative around a young dancer, ensure sponsors pull funding, seed rumors, remove her from eligibility lists. The dancer's name wasn't printed, but the date matched the month Elise's world fell apart. Her hands trembled. "This is real." "I wanted you to see it first," Nathaniel said, "because if you ever decide to come forward, if you want justice, you won't be alone this time." Elise looked at the pages, at the words that once ended her dreams, and felt something rise inside her. Not rage, but clarity. She had been afraid of the past for so long, but maybe it was. Time, the past, became afraid of her. The morning light crept through the kitchen window, falling across the open folder on Elise's table like truth finally stretching its limbs. The pages were still there, proof of what had been done to her, evidence that she wasn't crazy. She wasn't overreacting. She hadn't imagined the whole world turning cold. Across the room, Zara hummed softly as she packed her school bag. The innocence in her song made Elise's chest ache. Her daughter had no idea that their quiet life had just been cracked open, that the ghosts Elise had buried for nearly a decade were now standing in the hallway, politely knocking. Nathaniel had left early, promising to do some digging, discreetly, and asking Elise to consider speaking out. Elise hadn't answered. She didn't know if she was ready for war. But one thing was becoming clearer. Her silence had never protected her. It had only given her enemies space to rewrite her story. As the apartment emptied, Elise stood alone, in the kitchen, staring at the name on the bottom of the memo. Patrick Reeves. She remembered him, suited, polished, cold eyes. He had attended 3 of her rehearsals before everything fell apart. He said he was from the sponsor committee, reviewing talent. Now she realized he'd been sent by Celeste, not to evaluate her future, but to erase it. Elise reached for her phone. She hadn't spoken to Danny in years, not since the time they'd shared a cup of gas station coffee after Danny's expose on a corrupt housing scheme had gotten her fired from a small newspaper. Danny Vargas had always chased truth, even when it bit back, and if anyone could help now, it was her. "Vargas," the voice answered after 2 rings. Still sharp, still fast. "It's me," Elise said. "It's Alicia." Silence. Then a low, stunned whisper. "Monroe?" Washington now. "Alicia, you're alive." "I'm more than alive," Elise said. "I'm ready." Within an hour, Danny was in her apartment, sitting at the same table where Elise had eaten too many lonely dinners. Her notepad was already out. "Tell me everything," she said. Elise started with the dance, the unexpected attention, Nathaniel, the memo. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She told it like a woman who had lived every syllable twice, once as pain, and now again as fire. When she was done, Danny leaned back and exhaled. "You're not the only one," she said. Elise blinked. "What?" "I've tracked women, talented women, whose careers mysteriously crumbled after coming into Celeste Callahan's orbit," Danny said. "An opera singer who lost her voice after a planted scandal. A sculptor who was accused of theft without proof. A pianist whose hands were insured for millions until she was publicly shamed and dropped." Elise felt her hands curl into fists. Why would she do it? "Because power," Danny said, "protects itself by cutting down anything unfamiliar that threatens its rhythm. And you, my friend, danced out of rhythm." They both sat in silence for a moment. Then Elise stood. "I've got something for you." She disappeared into her bedroom closet, pulling out a battered shoebox from the highest shelf. Inside were scraps of her former life, newspaper clippings, printed emails, photographs of her on stage. But beneath those memories were newer ones, things she had collected over years of working at the Halcyon. Elise had always been observant. It was a habit dancers developed, watching angles, timing, intention. When she became a janitor, she simply turned that focus to people, guests, executives, conversations overheard when people thought the cleaning lady couldn't possibly understand. Trash bins that held shredded papers, except some were not shredded enough. One by one, she laid them on the table, photos, documents, printouts, notes scribbled on napkins, audio snippets from an old recorder she used to carry in her apron just in case someone tried to accuse her of stealing. Danny's eyes widened. "You've been documenting this whole time." "I didn't know why at first," Elise admitted. "I just knew people like Celeste don't play fair. And I couldn't afford to be blindsided again." Danny grinned. "You built a case without even knowing it." Elise hesitated. "It's not just me, there's a whole web." "What do you mean?" "The invisible ones," Elise said. "Janitors, waiters, valets, elevator operators. We see everything. We hear everything. Because to people like Celeste, we're part of the furniture." Danny leaned forward. "How do we reach them?" Elise opened her phone and tapped on a private messaging group. Backhall Voices. The chat lit up with names. Rosa from housekeeping, Malik from security, Jamie from catering, Andre, the night shift elevator tech. All of them had stories, things they'd seen, things they'd filed away. Some had recordings, others had statements. They were too afraid to share until now. Elise typed, "It's time. If you've got anything on the Callahan family or anyone they hurt, send it to me." "We're going to use it," replies poured in. Photos of bruised interns, time-stamped messages, screenshots of disgusting remarks made by board members. Elise stared at the screen, stunned. "They thought they silenced you," Danny whispered. "But you've been listening the whole time." "No," Elise said. "We have." That afternoon, Elise met with Nathaniel again, this time in a small cafe tucked behind the theater district. He had already seen the social media buzz, guests, from the gala talking about the mysterious dancer, reporters trying to dig up her identity. "I'm sorry," he said as soon as they sat. "I didn't mean for this to get so loud." "I'm not hiding anymore," Elise replied. "But if this goes public, you need to be ready." Nathaniel nodded. "I already stepped down from the foundation board." Elise blinked. "You what?" "My mother thinks legacy means control," he said. "I want to build something else. And if that means burning bridges, so be it." They sat in silence, sipping coffee that had gone cold. Then Nathaniel asked, "What are you going to do now?" Elise looked out the window where Zara's school bus was driving past. She saw her daughter's small face pressed against the window, waving at the world with trust. "I'm going to light a match," Elise said quietly, "and show people that just because we've been cleaning up their messes doesn't mean we can't expose them too." Across the city, the powerful still walked in confidence, but they didn't know the floors beneath them were shifting, because for the first time in her life, Elise wasn't just a former dancer. She was a woman surrounded by the network of the invisible, and they were done being silent. It began with a single post. An anonymous account on social media uploaded a short clip, grainy but clear, showing a young janitor cleaning the Callahan Foundation's VIP boardroom late one evening. The audio was low but distinct. Two men laughing. One said, "She really thought she'd get a promotion after dancing for Nathaniel?" The other responded, "Please, Celeste would bury her alive if she got that far." The post went viral within hours. Hashtags began to trend. Invisible voices, she danced, anyway, Callahan cover-up. Within 48 hours, 3 more clips surfaced. A voice, memo from a former assistant. A screenshot of a memo outlining preemptive damage control for anyone who might embarrass the Callahan name. A recording of Celeste Callahan herself, giving orders to a PR firm to keep the undesirables in their place. By the end of the week, Elise Washington's name was on the lips of every journalist in Manhattan. But Elise wasn't giving interviews. Not yet. She was building something bigger than a headline. In a modest office space donated by a nonprofit, theater group, Elise, Danny Vargas, and a team of volunteer investigators, most of them former hotel staff, created a digital dossier. A living, breathing archive of injustice. Each file, each clip, each story had a name, a date, a face. Women like her. Talented. Silenced. And all with connections to the Callahan Foundation's cultural gatekeeping. Zara stayed close, coloring, at the corner desk while her mother pieced together the puzzle of her own fall. Then came the invitation. A national arts conference, held once a year at Lincoln Hall, was suddenly abuzz with whispers about Elise. A well-known activist and dance patron named Irene Lockwood extended a personal invite for Elise to speak on the panel titled, "Restoring Voices, Talent Lost in the Shadows." At first, Elise hesitated. "I'm not ready to stand in front of all those people again," she told Danny. But Danny looked her straight in the eye. Alicia Monroe was silenced. Elise Washington survived. Now it's time for the world to meet the woman who did both. Elise took a deep breath. Okay. Meanwhile, at the Callahan estate, Celeste was losing control. The leaks had disrupted everything. Sponsors were pulling out of upcoming galas. 3 board members resigned. Nathaniel hadn't returned her calls in 5 days. And worst of all, someone from within the foundation had sent her an anonymous envelope with a note inside. The girl you tried to bury learned how to dig. Celeste sat alone in her marble kitchen, the walls that once protected her now echoing with the sounds of a crumbling empire. At the same time, Nathaniel was in a conference room across town, finalizing documents that would transfer control of all his personal trust funds away from the family business. His team looked nervous. "You're sure about this, sir?" his lawyer asked. Nathaniel didn't blink. "Absolutely. I'm done protecting a name that doesn't deserve my silence." On the day of the conference, Lincoln Hall overflowed with media. The program simply read, Speaker, Elise Washington, dancer, mother, truth-teller. Backstage, Elise paced. She wore a simple navy dress, not flashy, not dramatic, but every line of her posture carried quiet power. Zara squeezed her hand, smiling up at her. "Mama, remember what I told you? You looked like a queen." Elise knelt and kissed her daughter's forehead. "And you make me feel like one." When she stepped onto the stage, the lights were hot and blinding, but Elise didn't falter. She looked out at the sea of faces, some curious, some skeptical, many hopeful. She took a breath, her voice steady. "For years, I was told that I was lucky to be included, that my talent had limits, that my story was only valuable if it made someone else look generous. I believed them, for a while. Then they took everything, from me, my name, my stage, my truth." She paused, the room hushed. But they forgot something. I was still watching. Elise shared her story, not as a victim, but as a witness. She revealed the memo, the recordings, the community of staff who had been ignored, dismissed, and silenced. She spoke the names of other women whose careers had been shattered. And then she said the name Celeste Callahan. The room shifted, gasps, cameras clicking, heads turning. "I do not speak her name to hurt her," Elise said. "I speak it because silence helps no one but the powerful. And if I can help even one girl, one artist, believe that her voice matters, then everything they did to me becomes the beginning, not the end." The audience stood. Applause thundered through Lincoln Hall. Elise bowed her head, not in humility, but in victory. Later that night, news broke across every major outlet. Callahan Empire under fire after whistleblower's stunning speech. Elise's name trended globally. Donations poured into community arts programs. Dance schools in 5 cities named scholarships after her. And in a dark, quiet study, Celeste Callahan received a visit from her own son. Nathaniel stood at her door, face calm, expression unreadable. "You came to your senses," Celeste said, rising from her chair. "I did," he replied, "just not in the way you hoped." He placed a thick manila envelope on her desk. Inside, a formal declaration of severance from all Callahan Foundation leadership, a public letter of apology, and a full list of private donations being transferred to the newly launched Monroe Institute for Inclusive Arts, founded in Elise's name. "You destroyed her once," he said, "but now you'll spend the rest of your life watching her rebuild everything you tried to take." Celeste's hands trembled. "I did what I had to do," she whispered, "to preserve tradition, to protect our name." "No," Nathaniel said. "You did it to feed your fear, and the world's done feeding it." He left without looking back. Across the city, Elise stood on the empty stage of a small theater, alone for a moment. She stepped into the center, where the spotlight would soon shine, and closed her eyes. No music played. No one watched, but she danced. slow, graceful, grounded in pain, lifted by pride. Every movement told the truth, and when she opened her eyes, Zara was clapping quietly from the seats. "Mama," she whispered, "you made the stage yours again." Elise smiled, breathing in the warmth of the lights. "No," she said. "Ours." 6 months later, the rusted scaffolding of Elise's past had been rebuilt into something radiant and real. On the edge of Harlem, where the sounds of jazz still hummed through the bricks and fire escapes like memory, stood a new building with glass doors and open windows that invited in the sun, the wind, and most importantly, every child who had ever been told they didn't belong. Its sign read, "The Monroe School of Dance and Performing Arts." It wasn't made of marble or funded by aristocrats, but it pulsed with life and color, like a heartbeat stitched together by love, pain, and the defiant belief that art belongs to everyone. The grand opening was a city-wide event. News vans lined the sidewalks. Children from all boroughs gathered in their best sneakers and sparkly shoes. Parents clutched enrollment forms like golden tickets. And in the center of it all stood Elise, not in uniform, not in shame, but in a flowing, white dress that moved with the breeze like it remembered every pirouette she had once buried. She wasn't Alicia Monroe, the fallen ballerina. She wasn't Elise Washington, the invisible janitor. She was both, and she was free. Inside, the studio walls were lined with photos, not just of Elise, but of dancers from every background, shade, shape, and style. There were ballet slippers, beside tap shoes, Arabic calligraphy alongside jazz posters, quotes from Frida Kahlo, Maya Angelou, even Beyoncé. A line painted above the entrance read, "When the world closes its doors, build a stage." Nathaniel stood by the piano, dressed casually, sleeves rolled up, hair a little longer than it used to be. His eyes never left Elise. He had donated the seed funding, $10 million, and never once asked to put his name on it. When a reporter asked why, he simply said, "Because the best thing I ever did was step aside so someone greater could lead," and Zara, now 10, danced at the front of the first class that day, her hair in 2 braids, her shoes too big, her joy too loud. She twirled and laughed and looked at her mother every few seconds for approval. "You look like you're flying," Elise whispered from the edge of the studio. "I'm just dancing like you," Zara beamed. By afternoon, the internet was flooded with photos of the opening. A photo of Elise cutting the ribbon. A photo of Zara hugging her mother tightly. A photo of a group of children of all races leaping across the mirrored floor in unison. The caption on one viral post read, "They tried to erase her. She wrote a new chapter instead. The forgotten dancer is forgotten no more." And yet, not everyone celebrated. Across town, in a much smaller apartment than she was used to, Celeste Callahan watched the coverage from a modest TV mounted to the wall. Her world had shrunk. Her phone rarely rang. The foundation had collapsed. Her friends had scattered like frightened birds, and the art scene she once ruled had erased her name from every plaque, every list. But what hurt the most wasn't the silence. It was the realization that the very woman she tried to destroy had become the symbol of everything she claimed to represent: dignity, power, legacy. Celeste once believed that control came from wealth, from walls and invitations. But Elise had shattered that illusion without money, without privilege, with nothing but truth and the strength to rise. One day, Celeste did something no one expected. She showed up, quietly, uninvited, at the Monroe School. She sat in the back row during a recital. No one recognized her at first. On stage, Zara danced a solo piece to Nina Simone's "Ain't Got No, I Got Life." Her arms moved like poetry, her feet stitched rhythms into the floor. When the music faded, she stood in stillness, eyes shining, breath trembling, and then the room exploded in applause. As the clapping faded, Elise stepped on stage. She looked out over the audience, and her eyes landed, unmistakably, on the familiar figure in the back row. Celeste, older, smaller, quiet. They locked eyes. A pause held the air. Then Zara, not knowing who the woman was, turned to Elise and whispered, "Who is that?" Elise smiled faintly. "Someone who came to listen." After the recital, Celeste approached. She didn't speak right away. She just handed Elise an envelope. Inside was a letter. "There are no words I can say to undo what I did, but I watched. My son become a better man by following you, not me. You didn't just dance that night. You walked through every door I tried to close and built one behind you for others to enter. I came to say I was wrong, and I see you now. Celeste Callahan." Elise folded the letter. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say I forgive you. She only said, "We have open enrollment every season. You're welcome to donate. But the door stays open for everyone now." Celeste nodded. "That's more than I deserve." Elise nodded too. "That's how change begins." Later that night, Elise stood in the studio alone. The lights were off. The mirrors reflected only the city lights outside. She placed an old pair of satin ballet shoes on the windowsill. Faded, frayed, worn to the thread. They were her first. The ones she wore the day she got her acceptance into the conservatory. She placed a plaque below them. She rose, not because they let her, but because she refused to stay down. And across the room, Zara twirled in slow circles, laughing. "Mama, dance with me." Elise stepped forward, took her daughter's hands. No stage, no audience, no orchestra. Just two hearts, full, healed, and finally free. They danced in silence, and the world kept watching.